Welcome, Carolina Panther fans. This is Cat Scratch Playback.
Today on Playback, the guys host NFL analyst and former player Ross Tucker. Ross rates GM Dave Gettleman and the offensive lineman in this year's draft. It's May 4th, 2014, and this is episode 4.
You know, guys, one of the greatest things about producing this show is I have the opportunity to bring on people whom I admire and are getting it done the right way, without shortcuts or gimmicks, just passion, ability, and preparation. He's Ross Tucker, and he's our next guest, and he has all of those attributes in spades. Now, just to give you a few of his bona fides, he played in the NFL for over 7 years, where he played every position on the offensive line. He has his own radio show, The Morning Kickoff, on SiriusXM Radio, and he's a host and creator of the smartest and most entertaining NFL podcast in the universe, the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. You can find that at rosstucker.com. He's a regular analyst on Pro Football Talk, and he's the founder and CEO of Go Big Recruiting. I could go on and at length, but hey, it's going to be in the show notes and you guys can read. And hey, I want to talk to him. I can't wait. So let's bring on Ross. Hey, Ross, thanks for joining us so much today.
Yeah, my pleasure, Jason, and the fellows. Thanks for having me. I think this is an awesome thing that you guys have going on. Thanks
a bunch. So one of the real impetus behind bringing you on is the podcast that you had with Greg Cosell on April 2nd. And you guys had a real amazing exchange where you evaluated the top offensive line prospects in this year's draft. Now, the Panthers are picking late in the first round. Our GM, Dave Gettleman, he loves the hog mollies up front. Now, in your expert opinion, and I know that you looked at these guys closely, who are some of the offensive linemen the Panthers should target in the late first round and beyond?
Well, that's interesting, because you never really know who will be available at that point. What I found interesting is talking with different people, even like on today's podcast, with Louis Riddick, and him talking about David Yankee, the Stanford offensive guard that, a lot of the different publications out there have ranked much, much higher than most of the scouts have him ranked. I think two guys, though, I still think they'd like to get a tackle if they could, right? So then at that point, the guys that will probably be in their wheelhouse, Cyrus Kouandjio from Alabama, Morgan Moses from Virginia, Jawan James from Tennessee. Those will probably be the offensive tackles, along with that they'll think about. Another guy that I really keep an eye on for them is a guy out of Nevada, Joel Bitonio, because he's got some versatility. So they could put him at a bunch of different spots if they needed to, which I think is really helpful as well. As you guys know, I am a big believer in that versatility. And that's important to note, because if you look at Gettleman's background in New York and you look what they've done, drafting a guy like Justin Pugh, or even signing Jeff Schwartz in free agency, and I guess you could argue both those things were done after Gettleman left. But my point is they clearly value having an ability to have some versatility and maybe put the guy at different positions depending on how some other guys pan out.
It's a pretty good list. I was wondering, in your evaluation process, Ross, what are the top 3 attributes you look for first when you're evaluating offensive tackles, and why?
Probably number one, I think you have to stick with the feet, with the athleticism. And it used to be that they would mainly talk about that in terms of left tackles, but I really think as much as teams throw the ball now, as much as you see good rushers on the opposite side, you guys obviously are a testament to that in Carolina with the guys you have rushing off the edge. You can tell that there's good players on both sides. So you can't just think, well, we just need to have a good left tackle as a pass blocker. Both of the guys really need to pass block. And, back in the day, your right tackle would be more the physical, the hammer, and the run game. But I think that's been a little bit mitigated. I really do. I think you want two guys that can pass protect. So I think I'd start number one with the feet. Number two, I think if you can have it, it's really nice to have arm length. But then number 3, I think, is just awareness and technique.
You mentioned a couple guys and a couple of names that really haven't been mentioned or spoken about all that much in the media, in the draft industry. What do you think the draft industry's impact is on teams and the scouts, and to what extent do you think that may be a little over influence?
Yeah, I would think very little, and I'd like to let's hope it's very little, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Why would anybody make any decisions based on what the media thinks? I mean, if you think about the amount of man hours and the time that goes into picking these players and making these decisions and grading these players and putting a board together, why would you care what some guys in the media that didn't watch one college game this fall because they were in the airport, or have not watched 1 second of tape? Why would you care what those guys think or say at all? Which is why I don't really understand, to be honest with you. I'm not understanding why people will put out bad information, hoping players fall. Who's gonna fall for that? Like who's gonna say, you know what, we were gonna take him, we had him ranked high, but we just read this report that he had a bad workout with so and so team. Real? Are you kidding? I don't understand that. Now, if you come out with information about a positive drug test or a bad Wonderlic score or something like that, and maybe you're trying to put pressure on the teams ahead of you to know, hey, you can still take that guy we want, but if you do, people are going to point out the fact that you took him even though he had a failed drug test, and they're going to look negatively on that selection. But I guess I would look at that and say, if you pick the player and he doesn't play well, I don't think people are going to really care whether or not he had a failed drug test or a bad Wonderlic or had a bad private workout. I mean, the pick either works or it doesn't.
So things are a lot more nuanced than maybe what we hear in the media sometimes. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have with Ross today. He's Ross Tucker, and he is awesome. You can find him on Twitter at Ross Tucker NFL or rosstucker.com. Ross, is there any other places that people can keep track of everything you're involved with?
Yeah, but you know what? I don't really care. I mean, we don't need to promote the other places. I'd rather just promote Cat Scratch Fever. You know what I mean?
Us too. All right, Ross. Well, thanks again for joining us.
Hey, by the way, I got to tell you guys, I was a little harsh on Gettleman earlier this off season, but the more I've thought about it, the more I kind of respect the approach he's taken and the way he's gone about it this off season. Initially, I was just disappointed that I felt like they were thrown in the towel for this season, so to speak. But the more I did the math and the more I looked at it, this is kind of a reality that they had to face. I respect that he's facing it the way he is, and he's actually done a pretty decent job of bringing in guys that maybe aren't quite as good but can still help this team win and help this team have success for a lot less money. I mean, I don't know how much you guys know about Jericho Cottrey or Jason Avant. I know both those guys. They are excellent, excellent people, and they're solid receivers. They'll be where they're supposed to be. They'll do the right things. They'll both block in the run game. They're guys that Cam Newton can count on. You're not going to get a ton of big, flashy plays from them, but it says a lot about who Gettleman's trying to bring in. He didn't have to break the bank for him. And then I think you can say the same thing about some of the guys they got on the back end. Thomas Decoux, Antoine Cason, Roman Harper. Are those guys great at this point in their career? No, but look, they're getting those guys at fractions, pennies on the dollar from what teams were paying them last year, which tells you, okay, they're probably not as much worth as much as they were getting last year, but my guess is all those guys are steals. All those guys are relative bargains if you think about how little they're paying them.
His new nickname in Carolina is Dollar Menu Dave, so he's getting the most for his money. He's getting the most value. So we're looking forward to hopefully him striking the lottery again like he did last year with Ted Ginn and Mike Mitchell and those type of guys, which may be actually better in the back end this year than we were last year possibly. So it's going to be real interesting to see how it all plays out. Hopefully we'll have a flood of new faces in wide receiver, but we'll just have to wait and see after the draft.
Yeah, man, you guys need some linemen and receivers. I'm not breaking any new ground there. This This is good. It's unfortunate because I think that they're probably going to take a step back this year. In fact, I'd be surprised if they don't. But if you're a true Carolina Panthers fan like you guys are, I think you got to feel great with the moves he's made to at least keep you guys in the mix this year while not penalizing you financially in future years. I'm a big believer in Gettleman, and not just because his accent is awesome.
All right, well, it's not just about hog mollies. And thanks again, Ross. We won't keep any more. You've been more than generous with your time tonight.
All right, take care, fellas. Anytime.
Thanks, Ross. All right, that was really interesting, especially interested in Joe Petonio. That's fascinating that he mentioned that name just before the broadcast. We were just talking about him. So maybe, Chris, you can tell, you're the one who actually brought him up. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you think is special about him, why he's being underappreciated, and why you think he might be a name the Panthers would be interested in.
Well, first off, I believe that he comes off the line with more intensity and more fire and with more quickness than anybody that I evaluated. I think he has a chance to be an excellent run blocker. He does sometimes get out ahead of his knees and feet, but I think that's something that can be coached, and you can fix that technique issue. But I think he's outstanding as far as an aggressive guy that's going to knock some people back off the line of scrimmage.
Clint, did any of them stand out to you in particular that you want to focus on, or you want to talk about a little bit more at length?
Well, I would just say that what I've noted from this draft is that I'm just seeing a lot of projects. I'm not seeing a complete prospect. I could go from anyone all the way down to James Hurst, all the way up to Greg Robinson. Now, after Greg Robinson, I could find holes, maybe less holes than Taylor Lewan, but I'm seeing a lot of guys who aren't plug-and-play guys. I'm seeing guys that you have to project whether you can fix whatever their deficiencies are to get a starter.
I'll just open up the floor in general. Ross mentioned free agency. He talked about some of the guys we brought in, Jericho Cottree and Jason Avant, two really high character guys. I think he actually mentioned on his podcast that the Eagles GM is really nice. Jason Avant, a goodbye letter with a very rare since Avant isn't exactly a superstar. I think that says a lot about his character. I can't imagine the Panthers are possibly done. You fill the meeting room full of veterans who are essentially high character but relatively low splash type players. You gotta think there's a deluge of wide receivers coming to the draft. What do you think, guys?
Well, I believe, this is what we kind of alluded to all along, is that they weren't going to try to find any splash guys in free agency. They didn't have the money to do that. And, in getting rid of Steve Smith, they definitely they knew they were going to have to move on in this deep wide receiver class, bring in some impact rookies, but you had to have veterans and character veterans that do the right things on and off the field and in that meeting room to help bring those guys on and accelerate their development and their ability to contribute early.
And I think a lot of this has to do with Cam Newton. I think they may have had feelers that felt like maybe some of the influence on Cam Newton was negative. And they wanted to get that influence of more veterans, less helter-skelter in the locker room per se. Whatever they were sensing in order to get those character guys in there, I really felt like it was about Cam Newton. If they couldn't get him the talent, they wanted to give him veterans and influence and just more professionalism around them.
Really seems like just more stability all around Cam Newton. Let's open up the topic a little bit more. Ross said that he was a little hard on Dave Gettleman, but then he actually, a couple episodes later, he sort of walked that back a little bit, and he did even more this evening. If you're looking at the job Dave Gettleman has done, considering the financial constraints he's been under, how would you guys rate the job that he was doing, and would you do anything different?
I think Dave Gettleman is doing what should have been done in the first place. He's being calculated. Calculating was what he's doing. He's not thinking with emotion. He's not keeping players that are outliving their productivity. So if you can get the same player for less money, do it. I like the moves. It's been long time coming. it may not look good in the now because you're seeing the emotional connection between players that they fans have gravitated towards. But if you step back away from it and just look at it just from a salary cap league, these are moves that has to happen.
Yeah, I think that what he's doing is, pretty much, write out the book of what you would want to see your GM doing, which is his job is to protect the team and to set you up to have sustained success. And by, bringing in the right type of guys, building around your superstar, or guys that he can trust, putting yourself in position to always to have guys that you can rely on. You're not going to have these character issues. You're not going to have the distractions. You're going to have a locker room full of hardworking guys on the practice field, in the weight room off-season program that are going to build team chemistry because, hey, we're all alike. We're all hustlers. We're out here hustling to get everything that we can get and win a championship, all in the same direction with no distractions. And I think that's been a time-tested way of building a team, and he's going about it the correct way.
I still think it's too early to really tell and grade him because he's had to kind of do reclamation on some of the things that have been the state of the team as it is. And there's choices he had to make that may have to take a step back in the now to take a step forward in the future.
I mean, when you look at it, and especially when you look at this year's draft, I think this year's draft is exceptionally weak at the defensive end position as far as depth. So, you locking up, you have to work to lock up Greg Hardy, Obviously, he got the tag, but they did that, and that's something that if you were looking forward and projecting forward, you knew that was a guy you had to keep on your team, and I think going forward, and you're trying to grade him out, is going to be, are they going to be able to lock Greg Hardy up? I believe they absolutely will, and that's a position looking forward, unless some of these guys that got injured in college, like Dominique Easley, if the team takes him and kicks him back even out the defensive end, which he started at in college, I don't know. He's 6'1". If they take a guy like that and he recovers from ACL, then, you could gain a little bit more depth. But I think that he did exactly what they need to do. But, it's also going to tell, with all their needs at wide receiver, when are you going to take a tackle? We obviously talked about, and Clint alluded to all the projects in this draft. So if you think that there's all these projects in the draft, then, he's got to grab one that he really, really likes early, and he might have to go to the depth in the wide receiver draft to find his right guys.
And this is where scouting, you've seen that turnover in the scouting department with the Panthers, so you're going to really see if you're going to take a tackle. I'm not saying these guys can't play, but they have deficiencies that if you feel you can fix them, you may be able to come away with a player that can be a plug later down the line. But I'm just not seeing out of the top 4 tackling.
It's actually one of the hallmarks of the Panthers for, I don't know, as long as I can remember, has been team has always been run like a family. And Dave Gettleman really is the changing of the guard in that it's really being run a lot more like a business. It's a successful business at that. So there are tough choices that you have to make, and some of those tough choices, well, if you look at Jordan Gross's retirement ceremony, he basically let the cat out of the bag when he said, I didn't like Dave Gettleman when I first met him, because he was stomping on some sacred cows. He was doing some things that just aren't and weren't done in the Panther organization. They probably needed to be done. And you heard Ryan Khalil sort of echo that a week or two ago when he said, hey, you know what? There's a lot of competition in this room and in this building. And that's going to be a healthy thing for us, and that's going to be a good thing for us in the long term. There will be some growing pains, as Ross alluded to, but in the end, we're going to be better for it.
And I think that's kind of the difference between what I was really saying earlier with the things that had to get done now. I mean, you were talking about that earlier the other day, saying the Panthers ran the organization like a family. and that's good. You can draw maybe some free agents, and you can keep some continuity in the locker room in the now. But going forward in a salary cap league, you have to make decisions that's based on some calculating numbers and what people, the identity of what their players are right now, instead of holding on to something that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I think, the way that everything's ironing out, it's all we'll find out a lot more once, we get the draft day, because there's going to be opportunities. I full on believe it, with some of the depth that you have in this draft, where I think you have depth at the quarterback position, the wide receiver position. Those, to me, are positions where guys are going to fall in love with their player. And I think there's going to be a lot of movement on draft day. So what does Gettleman want to do?
I think one thing that really resonates with offensive linemen is that they don't have the same bottleneck as defensive linemen, talent-wise. So there's less talented defensive linemen than there are offensive linemen. So you can get imperfect offensive linemen that can still function in the NFL. I mean, it doesn't have the same bottleneck. Whereas you can get a guy maybe in the third or fourth round and you can start. You're just not finding edge rushers or pass rushers, impact guys later in the draft. There's not as many.
Let me break in real quick there, Clint. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on Chris. Ross said something that was interesting to me, and that he mentioned one of the first things he starts with are the feet, and he's looking for that athleticism. And one of the things that I've heard other people say, that who's being I respect, they say, don't get overly enamored with those athletic guys. They can be trouble. The guy who has good technique and maybe he's not the greatest athlete in the world, but he can still play. He's good. You know what you're getting. You're getting a player instead of a prospect, so you're getting a known versus an unknown. How do you guys parse what Ross had to say about athleticism and the balance that you bring forth as far as player versus prospect there?
But my take on offensive linemen is that this is around the age where these guys are physically developing, to where you really don't know what you're going to get physically as they mature into their, they turn 24, 25. Some guys may mature earlier. So you may see guys that look finished now and guys that are in their 19, 18, 20 years old. But it's just one of those things. Can you mold that guy? Can you develop them so that when they hitting that 24, 25-year-old range, they're developed, and now you have a totally different player. That happens all the time in the offensive line. It happens continuously.
Yeah, I'm with Ross on the feet. When it comes to with an offensive tackle, it's just like everything else. A guy's got to have the skill set first. There's guys playing semi-pro football, and everybody that goes to the game knows, hey, that guy can't play in the NFL, all right? So there's plenty of guys out there, even when they had NFL Europe, there's plenty of guys there, CFL. That guy can't play in the NFL. You've got to have the physical ability to actually play in the NFL. So can a guy kick slide, to where he can protect against a quicker speed rush? Can he maintain? Does he have the physical ability, the punching power, that if a guy starts on a speed rush and dips inside, where he can set and keep that guy at bay and keep him from dipping underneath him? You got to have the physical ability starting out. If you don't have the physical ability, then you're at a loss. If you're a wide receiver and you're 5'9", you run a 4.7, all right, you're probably not going to make it in the league. You got to start off with the physical ability all the time. It's just like a marriage or a girlfriend. She better be attractive to start off with. Anybody saying you don't have to be attracted to them, they're kidding themselves. So you got to have some physical ability to start off with. But when you look at it, you take that and then you go to the mental aspect. What kind of playbook can this guy digest? What can he handle as far as, does he understand what he's supposed to do? And back to the feet, is he going to take a false step because he doesn't know how his steps are supposed to be on zone, or when he's pulling, or on different types of pass sets? Or is even when I was evaluating one of the players, the guy took a back step on a cut block, and that's typically not something you want to see. And this guy's rated very highly, and he doesn't have his feet. You can start at the feet and look at what's going on and say, this is a problem now. Is that something that he was coached to do? Then you have to go and you have to do your homework and find out. Maybe it's just what he was coached to do, and that coach had success with that, and that's why he wants him to do that.
All right, certainly there's a floor for the offensive ability and what will play and what won't play in the NFL. So, Chris, how do you balance that? It's who do you prefer? Do you prefer Jake Matthews or do you prefer Greg Robinson? One guy, he's going to play, you know what you're getting more or less, or at least you think you do. He's a little bit more of a finished product. Whereas a Greg Robinson, he might be Jason Peters, or he might just be okay. He might just be average. How do you strike that balance between?
We kind of touched on this a little bit. With Greg Robinson and Jake Matthews, I think, in my estimation, Jake Matthews gives you an excellent pass protector. If that's what and that's where you want to gear your offense, you're going to throw the ball 35, 40 times a game, and that's where you want to go with it, then that's fine. Or if you are one of those guys that wants a pass protector on the left side and a run dominant guy on the right side, then you can go that way with Jake Matthews if that's the guy you need on the left side. Now, if you want a guy that's just going to flat out maul you and you want to be a downhill team, if I'm the Seattle Seahawks, you know what I'm saying, that type of style team, and I know I want to knock you in the next week, Greg Robinson is the perfect fit for people that in a copycat league that want to, gear themselves towards being more like the Seattle Seahawks. That's your guy. That's a guy where you don't see the Steelers move around too much in the draft. And you're thinking about the knocks the Steelers have gotten about the type of offensive linemen that they used to have and the type of guys that they need to have, and they've been drafting the wrong guys. If there's any way the Steelers can move up and take Greg Robinson, he is the guy that they need to do what perennially they were known for, which is we're going to knock you in the next week, we're going to knock you off the ball, and we're going to keep our defense off the football field. So it's really your cup of tea with these guys. Where we see them as not as projects, it's because we're looking for a guy that can do both. And we're seeing guys evaluated for the first round, and we're not seeing guys that excel in run blocking and pass blocking. But that's not to say that you don't see some guys excel in one area. And I think that's what you're going to get is some people are evaluating guys and saying, we want to take this guy because he fits perfectly what we do. And it's like I said before, you're going to have some smaller guys that are off the radar where a guy like, that runs zone, he may want that smaller guy that people are right now staying away from because they're like, well, he can't move anything. But, he's quick. He can get around and he can get out on screens and do different things. So it's really your cup of tea.
And that's really what I see this draft is. And you hit it dead on the head that you really have to project what are you doing, what can these guys do. Because if you draft them and they don't have the skill sets for your scheme, I just don't see the diversity in these guys after the first 4 or 5 offensive linemen. But I think Greg Robinson would be a perfect fit for St. Louis Rams with their downhill running game and their identity they developed with Zach Stacy in that running game. He'd be a perfect fit.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Clint. And especially thanks to Ross Tucker. Again, you can find him at rosstucker.com, at RossTuckerNFL. And we'll see you guys next time.
I think it'd be a good ending if we end it with, as you say goodbye, Chris says goodbye first, like, thank you, and I say thank you. Just something like that.
Okay, we'll do it. Okay, gotcha. All right, that's all the time we have left today on Playback. You really got your money's worth today. Thanks, Chris, for joining us again.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Clint, thanks to you as well.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you guys next week on Playback.